I am Lawrence Chuno, and this is Doing Jazz. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Jazz. My name is Lawrence Chuno, and this episode is with award-winning bassist Peter Slavov. Peter Slavov is one of those musicians that you'd be glad you get to know. And am I glad that I was able to talk to him on this episode? Peter Slavov's musical ability as a bassist is well appreciated in the New York City jazz scene as well as around the globe. He has worked with household musical names including Joe Lovano and Quicy Jones. In fact, one of the high points of our conversation is a story involving Quicy Jones and crossing the US-Mexico border by foot. You'd want to hear that. Peter Slavov's new album is called Little Stories. It's a collection of songs, each telling a story, that come together to form a complete narrative. The song playing in the background is called Glide. During my conversation with Peter, you'll hear the songs Small Little Things, History of Beauty, and 9 a.m. These songs are all from the album Little Stories by Peter Slavov. After listening to this episode, you can learn more about Peter Slavov by going to the website of the show, www.doingjazz.net. You can follow the show on Instagram and on Twitter. The handle is at Doing Jazz. And you can listen to more episodes of Doing Jazz by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or any of the available podcast vendors. If you're on Spotify, please follow the Doing Jazz playlist, a one-stop playlist for songs by all the Doing Jazz guests so far. While on iTunes, please rate the show, leave a comment, and share the show with your loved ones. Please also consider donating and supporting Doing Jazz to enable us continue to make the show. The donation link can be found on the website of the show, www.doingjazz.net. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I present Peter Slavov. Thanks. Check. Can you speak a little bit?
Yes, here I am, Peter Slavov, bass player.
Great. Peter Slavov, welcome to Doing Jazz.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very good. I'm happy you're finally here. Yeah. You live in Astoria, you're telling me.
I do.
Yeah, and we're in Inwood, and I'm glad you found parking. Parking in my neighborhood is very, very difficult. I remember when I moved, I used to live in Washington Heights, about maybe 6 blocks away from here. And when I moved from Pittsburgh in 2014, when I brought my car and I found a place to park, and I parked there. The next day I came out, I saw a $150 ticket, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm still here for like the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave it there, and when I'm about to leave, I'm gonna move the car. When I came out, I saw another $150 because I'm used to once you get a ticket, you have one ticket for the whole day. But I didn't know that in this city, when you get a ticket, they could just come back and put another ticket there and put another ticket there.
Sometimes they change the sign overnight and then you get
really?
a ticket. That's happened to me.
Wow.
Before.
Yeah. So that's a New York thing.
Yeah.
So talking about New York, what's your day-to-day like in this city as a musician, as a bass player? Let's say this period of time.
Yeah, ideally I try to sneak in a couple hours of practice.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of listening to music.
Yeah.
I'm an obsessive listener. I listen to music at all times when I'm not practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Also like the more mundane, like day-to-day emails, trying to, now that I have a album out, booking gigs, doing press, all that stuff, what people call the hustle, which, when I was growing up, it was slightly different in that, basically our main job was to play music
Yeah.
and to be good at it. Now we have to deal with all these other things that used to be taking care of other, when there was a more established music industry, and like I feel that, like, now we have to do all stuff by ourselves. I mean, unless you're a superstar and have like a team, basically you pretty much do most of the things on your own, and it can be very stressful.
Yeah.
But if you get too stressed about it, then you don't get anything done. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
balance this out.
Now, when it comes to like doing the day-to-day hustle, as you call it, and I agree, it's a hustle. The emailing, you send 1,000 emails and you hear from like 10 people back.
Exactly.
When you do that, do you feel like doing it by yourself? Do you think there's an advantage to that? Because I used to wish I could have somebody do all my booking, all my hustling for me, even if it means just paying the person. But now I'm beginning to realize that maybe there's an advantage to doing it myself. Like the way I speak to the venue might be a little bit different, and they might be more comfortable with just telling me certain things that they won't tell somebody who they know is representing me,
Well, I mean, I feel that everything in this world has advantages. Doing everything on your own means that you don't have to pay anybody to do it for you, which, in the type of system that we live in, like every dollar counts. So I guess that's an advantage. And
can you bring it a little closer to your mouth?
Yeah, as far as like
you can move the
All right.
a little bit. Good.
As far as releasing your own music, of course, that also has the advantage of you making, getting most of the profits. You only share it with the distributor, and everything else is yours.
Yeah.
But then I feel that there's certain aspects of it that I don't love asking people that I don't know for gigs.
Yeah.
and not everybody. I don't want to put I don't want to stereotype people, but there are some people who really don't treat you well. Even if you think you're established in some way, even I feel that I've been here for 21 years and I've paid a lot of dues. I've played with very famous people. I've gotten awards and stuff like that. And then they just bring you down to earth and really make you feel like, I mean, and as a initially you're like, wow, that's terrible. But then you just get used to it and you don't take it that way, But it's, I mean, I think the advantage to having an agent is that they have to deal with that aspect of things, and you don't have to deal. But everything has advantages, of course. Yeah.
I see. I agree with you. You just released an album. I kind of want to know the mechanisms involved in it, specific to you. You have a group now. You have your own group, right?
I do. I mean, it's how do you say? I have a few people for each instrument.
Okay.
Like everybody in New York, because everybody's busy all the time. People are traveling.
Okay, good.
But
if you want to put up a gig now with a quartet, you have people to call.
Of course,
okay, good.
Yeah, I'm in the right place for that.
Yeah, okay. I know. Okay, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about the album. I am blanking out on the title, even though I've been listening to Little Stories. Because there's one song called Small Little Things, and the name of the album is Little Stories. So I don't want to call it the name. Yeah.
It's okay.
So and I was listening to it and I wanted to learn more about it, and but I only had the time to just read maybe a paragraph, and the paragraph says that it's about that each of the songs kind of tell a story.
Yeah.
But when I was listening to it, I listened from beginning to the end. From slide is
Glide, yeah,
glide
yeah,
glide is the first two. The last one is
Elegy,
elegy, yeah,
yeah,
through 9 a.m. So
yeah,
I listen to everything, and it tells me like a story. It's like
yeah.
the whole album is a story, but it's now I start listening the second time, I started getting the feeling of each song is a little story
Yeah.
in a big story. So, yeah, that's
That's a
how
great way to put it. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's very deep. Yeah.
So,
Well, that was my intention actually.
okay.
Now on the CD cover, I've written a little story about each tune, which it's basically what I when I have a gig, that's my way of engaging the audience with because you have to keep people's attention, and if you give them something other than the music to relate to, then they're like, oh, okay, he wrote this tune because because he was grieving for his father or whatever. So I basically put one paragraph about each song inside the CD, and it's basically that, telling the story behind the title, or the story behind the inspiration for the tune.
Yeah.
And but I'm totally aware that and I actually love it that people can just listen to the music and have their own have their own. It's like reading a book with illustrations. Like, say, if you read the book without the illustrations, you have your own picture, and then if you see the illustrations, sometimes they nail it, sometimes it's whatever. But that was the main idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I see.
Yeah.
You just talked about how you want to give the audience more to work with in terms of introducing the music, and I feel like for instrumental musicians, it's a little bit more difficult for you guys, since you don't have words to tell the
Right.
story. You
Yeah,
have to work really
exactly,
hard to
yeah.
actually tell the story using your music. Meanwhile, for vocalists, they could just start singing, and if the words are explicit enough, people can just capture it and get the feeling. So how do you try to balance that as an instrumentalist? Like, for instance, you give names to this music.
Yeah.
Maybe you can start with, how do you choose the names? Do you choose the names and you want to write, and then you say, I'm going to write a song that reflects these titles? Or do you write a song and then give it a title that you feel?
Most of the times I write the music first, and sometimes I have an idea about what a title can be, and sometimes I don't, but I mean, I always, I always, when the music is ready, I would listen to it, or I would play it on the piano, or just feel the vibe that the song is giving me, and then associate it with something. I mean, sometimes I write a song for a specific purpose, inspired by something, but sometimes it's the opposite. The music is ready, and then the music inspires me to think about something. So that's how I come up with the titles, but also, like, those stories that I wrote in the booklet, they're like they're a substitute for the lyrics that would be there.
Yeah. I see. Nice. Let's talk about some of the songs that you caught me listening to. Let's talk about Small Little Things.
Yeah. Well, Small Little Things started as, okay, so my girlfriend told me, okay, you have so many songs that, you have a song inspired by a book, you have a song inspired by the loss of your dad, we don't have a song for me. What's up? And I'm and I was like, okay, I'm gonna come up with something. And so I started writing this tune, and I wanted to write a tune that's like kind of a counterpoint between bass clarinet, piano, and the bass, but then it grew into something else. So you can hear that part only in the beginning where there's like a counterpoint. But I call it Small Little Things because my girlfriend has this like figure of speech where she says, you know, blah, 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 and small little things, such and such and small little things. And I think it's kind of cute, you know. So I dedicated it to her. I'm not sure she likes the song that much.
Really?
I know she does. But she write another one. But
I really like this song. Yeah.
But yeah, that song was I wrote it in about a month. I wrote it specifically for the record. That's actually the newest song on the record. And also as another, like, there's another coincidence there. The person playing the bass clarinet, his last name is Small. So it's like Small Little Things. You know, Mark Small is playing the bass clarinet. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And another one is a song that has vocals, History of Beauty.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, I've been very inspired by Brazilian music for a very long time. And, you know, I play a lot of Brazilian music around town, and you know, some of those like great Brazilian musicians like Gilberto Gil and Elis Regina, all these people are some of my musical heroes, the same way, you know, Coltrane and the jazz, you know, giants are. And so I just wrote this tune, and it came out like a Brazilian tune. And it was just it just came out so easily because I was at that time, when I wrote it, I was really into, you know, I was really listening to a lot of Brazilian music, and so the term History of Beauty, I read it in a novel somewhere. It was in a completely different context, but I felt it really represents the like Brazilian music, because no matter how advanced it is, you know, it always has this constant quality of being beautiful.
Being beautiful, and being accessible.
and very accessible.
Yeah, very
Even if
accessible,
even if it's complicated, you
Yes,
cannot
yeah,
hear that
yeah,
it's complicated
yeah.
because it's just so well crafted. And
I listened to some songs by Jobim,
yeah.
and they're so accessible, so easy to digest. Then I go to play them. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I really need to calm down
Yeah.
and learn how to learn all these chords, because
Yeah.
some of the chords are just like weird. Just
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, all these guys, Jubim and
Yeah.
those guys that came after him, like Javan and Gilberto Gil. I mean, some of the harmonies like super complicated,
yeah.
but it sounds
It
so
sounds-
easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought that maybe voice would be a good addition to that. And I also had a Brazilian guitarist, Marcio Filomena, play, just comp in that like kind of a samba bossa nova style. And then a great singer from Korea, Mi Kim. She has exactly the type of voice that I needed, which is, he has power, but it's not an obvious power. It sounds very breezy and very very tender.
Yeah.
But there's like there's an underlying power to that. So and actually I didn't initially plan to put this tune on the album, and last minute I thought, because I thought that it sounds too much like a bossa nova tune, so I wasn't sure it was gonna fit stylistically with everything else. But I was like, what, I need one more tune. So I just called up the guitar player and me, and I said, okay,
Nice.
let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's
The vocals the first time, it kind of sounded a little bit like Esperanza Spalding. yeah.
Well, SP is an old friend, but I'm not sure I could have afforded her for that.
You never
Yeah.
know. All you gotta
Hey.
do is ask.
Yeah, I was next time.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And another one that I kind of really dig is 9 a.m.
Yeah.
It's very sparse, and it has that quality of being very accessible too. But when you start listening, you see, okay, there's a lot of things, subtle things going on in
Yeah.
this song, and I really appreciated that.
Well, that I somehow achieved that situation where like actually that song has a really complicated harmony, but it doesn't sound like it. But the key changes all the time. But it's kind of like it goes through very easily. And I when I wrote it, I'm very inspired by Wayne Shorter's music, and I always feel like this is like my Wayne Shorter tune. I mean, it's nothing like any of his tunes, but like in my mind, it has some of that, some of his like sonic world, and also it reminds me of a walk, like a night walk. That's why I call it AM, because like the AM is in the late, like right after midnight hours.
I see.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
And initially I recorded it before with a different project, and it didn't have solos. It just like the melody twice, and then it was just like a little thing. But now I added solos, and those guys really like played great. And it has a vibe.
I like it.
Yeah.
Good. Let's talk about some of the things you've done. Maybe we should focus on the great people you've worked with. I was just, Scott told me about you. He's like, oh, you might want to check this guy out. And then I started reading. I'm like, okay, I would like to talk to him. You've worked with Joe Lovano.
Yeah.
And you've worked with Quicy Jones.
Yes.
And people forget that Quicy Jones is actually a musician. He's not just a producer,
Yeah. He's like one of the greatest arrangers of all time.
Yeah. So, let's talk about Joe Lovano. You played in his band,
Yeah, and I will keep speaking of Esperanza Spalding. Esperanza and I were at Berkeley around the same time. Although she's much younger than me. She's maybe like 10 years younger than me. But and so we were around Joe Lovano. We were at different times in his class at Berkeley, and then she she started playing with him.
Yeah.
And I think that may have been her first big gig. Like I think
Yeah.
Joe Lovano was the first one who recognized her talent and invited her, and so she became a part of a band called Us Five, where Joe has two drummers, piano, bass, and saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point when Esperanza really like became like a superstar,
Yeah.
because she's not just a jazz star, she's like
Yeah.
a household name.
Yeah.
Like I mean,
Yeah.
everybody knows
Yeah.
who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And so she couldn't make a lot of the gigs. So I actually started playing with Joe, subbing for Esperanza. And Esperanza and I, much like when we were in Boston, she'll be like, "Hey, can you do this gig?" And I was like, "Okay," and eventually I just started playing with Joe full time. And he got me for other projects too. And I was in his quartet. I was in Us Five. I was in another band called the Europa Quartet. I was in his Nonet. And like a lot of his projects. And I'm going back on the road with him this year.
Nice.
We're gonna do some stuff in Europe, because Joe, with that band Us Five, he has this year is 100-year anniversary of Charlie Parker's birthday. So Joe had this album with all like his own arrangements of like Charlie Parker tunes. And so we're going to celebrate that, and we're going on tour with Us Five. And I think the first gig is in San Francisco in April.
Nice.
At SF Jazz.
Wow.
Where Joe has residency. But yeah, that's how I mean, I was his student, then I didn't play with him for a long. I mean, we met in different like recording sessions, and we like cross paths. But I eventually started playing in his bands, and it's been super rewarding and great experience.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah.
You never know. It's like we just, as an artist, you just keep taking your journey, and the best thing is just to let yourself be free and just accept whatever comes along the way.
Yeah,
that's a really very good story. How about Quicy Jones?
Well, I met Quicy through a Cuban piano player that I was playing with called Alfredo Rodriguez.
Okay.
And Alfredo is this like total like piano virtuoso, and Quicy heard him at a competition in Switzerland or something, and told Alfredo, "If you ever make it to the States, come to LA. I'm gonna take care of you." So Alfredo, he moved to Mexico with his parents. They defected from Cuba. Then he just crossed the border. Like he got arrested. And I mean, I don't think he could have done this now, but like about 10 years, no, maybe 12 years ago, he crossed the border. He asked for, people from certain countries can get an asylum. Like Cubans are one of those countries. Actually, my country was like that when there was a communist dictatorship a long time ago. You could just apply for a green card at the border, So that's what Alfredo did. He crossed the border. He got arrested, but then he applied for asylum. They released him, so he showed up at Quicy Jones's door in LA. And Quicy took him under his wing. And then eventually, I mean, I know a lot of Cubans because when I went to school in Boston, I played a lot of Latin music around town, so I have a lot of friends from Cuba. So that pianist Alfredo, he was gonna have his first gig at Blue Note here in New York, playing opposite Ron Carter, and he needed a trio. So he approached a Cuban drummer who lives in New York called Francisco Mela, and asked Francisco to recommend a bass player. So Francisco recommended me. So I ended up playing with Alfredo for the next 6 or 7 years. We got nominated for a Grammy for one of the albums.
Wow.
And also I got to hang out with Quicy a lot. I got to meet Quicy. I got to play.
Quicy produced it.
Quicy produced actually 2 of the albums. I'm on the first album too, and Quicy produced that too.
Nice.
He produced the second one. he used to introduce us. He would fly with us wherever and just introduce us, and then we would hang. It was great.
Yeah.
He's an incredible person too. Like, he's not just like this god of music.
Yeah.
He's just like a really nice person, super super deep, and he's got a lot of wisdom that he can share with people younger than him, like us. And then I also played a few times in Quincy's. He had this project called the Global Gumbo, where he introduces like different like talents from around the world, like totally different. Like there was like an Arabic guy, and then there's a girl from Spain, and like all kinds of people. So I was in the band for that project for a few times. So I technically I played with Quicy Jones too, because that was his. He doesn't play since he was 30 something, right? He used to play trumpet, but he's the kind of the director of that band. So that's how I met him. That's how I played with him, and it's one of the highlights of my life.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good highlight.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's really good. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. See, I didn't know. I was just asking. I didn't know that the stories you're gonna tell about these two musical giants are these rich stories.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, let me just ask and see what he's gonna say. But I'm glad I asked.
The stories are always interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, the most uninteresting stories are from people who got everything very early on, and they're like, "Hey, I just got caught by by Wynton Marsalis." Okay, yeah. But yeah, I mean, no, I got for a guy from Bulgaria, which is a country that doesn't have much to do with this type of culture. I've been very fortunate to get to play with a bunch of people that I didn't even expect. My dad was a jazz musician, and my dad was a really good musician. So I grew up, listening to his records of Miles and Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and all that stuff. But we never, Bulgaria was such an isolated communist country, and people couldn't really travel, and we never imagined that one of us can like go to like New York and like play with like any cats, let alone like Quicy Jones and people like that. So I've been fortunate,
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
I paid my dues. I came here. I came to Berkeley without expecting anything. I thought I was gonna be like the
You're
worst.
like a blank slate.
I'll be like. I thought I'm gonna be like the worst bass player there probably. Of course, it turned out that wasn't the case. But I was like idealizing this place and everything, and then I just went through with the love of music. I just started getting gigs and started like meeting people, and they kind of related. We had similar stories, although they were from completely different backgrounds, from Cuba, from Brazil, from here in the States, and yeah, that's
the drum I play. My drummer that I play with, his name is Michael Vitali.
Oh yeah,
he went to Berkeley.
I met him a few times. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He holds this jam session at you can go ahead. Jam session at Bar Chord in Brooklyn. Yeah. I think it's every Sunday. I think it starts around 9 p.m.
I've been aware of this jam session, and I never made it there.
You should go. It's cool.
Yeah.
He told me that Esperanza Spalding stopped by there a few times. Yeah. Okay. I was gonna ask about your history, but I think as we went through, you've kind of covered that. There was something that you mentioned at the beginning that stuck with me. You're a musician. You're accomplished, but you mentioned that you listen. You still listen a lot to music. You still listen to music a lot.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
I can't live without music. I listen every morning when I'm falling asleep, when I wake up in the morning. When I'm doing something or just listening. I think people kind of lost the kind of the habit of just listening to music, not as background, but just
Yeah.
sit down and listen, you know. And I think it's very important because it just these are layers in your brain that just like they stick with you, and then you can build on that. And I also don't like I know some people who only listen to music in this way, where like, okay, I need to check this out because I want to know what they're doing, like listening in a kind of a
passive way.
Yeah, kind of like laboratory way, like, I mean, I prefer to always listen as like for the fun of listening and for the love of music, and if I really like something, of course, then maybe I will transcribe it or but I just take pleasure in listening to music, and all kinds of music too.
What have you listened to lately, like today?
Today I was listening. I found out this old concert recordings of the Brazilian singer Elis Regina, which she was very popular in the 70s, and I was thinking about how like every song she recorded by Milton Nascimento, all these people, actually some of the definitive versions were hers because she was such a strong voice. Once she recorded something, that's the version everybody knows. But I found like this like earlier versions of those tunes that she recorded when she was younger, with a different, like with a big band in the 60s, and I've been kind of meditating on that stuff, As far as jazz, I always, there's a few artists that I always come back to. I always come back to Coltrane. Like Coltrane is my total like hero. Mingus, I actually really like Joe Lovano too. I mean, I play with Joe, but I also listen to his stuff too a lot. And I mean, I like everybody and everything. I mean, music has to be really crappy for me not to like it.
I see.
You know what? I don't like music that's made with 100% commercial intent.
Okay.
That there's no like, because if you what's the most, like, Michael Jackson is the most sold artist of all time, but his music was not 100% commercial because he always tried to be great. Like artists like that, so there's always like an artistic purpose. He wants the music to be groovy and to be great and the arrangements to be happening. It's not just like, okay, I'm gonna put this out to make money. Of course, that's part of it, but so.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree with that, because I found out, which I have to say I found out late, that the best way to learn, sometimes it's just good to memorize a song.
Yeah.
And the best way to memorize a song is to have it in your brain effortlessly.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to enjoy it, listen to it, and just enjoy it, and then it sticks with you. Yeah,
of course.
Like I remember the first time I listened to Wayne Shorter's music was when I was in college, because I'm originally from Nigeria. I moved to the US in 2000 to study mathematics. I'm a mathematician. So, but that was when I found jazz, and I've continued learning jazz since then. So I listened to Wayne Shorter's etc. I didn't get it then.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. But then after a while I started listening to all his music, and I enjoy his music. I enjoy Footprints, and then last year I listened to that album again. And it did something to me that no album has ever done to me. I'm like, these songs are on another level.
Penelope?
Like, Penelope.
Man, yeah.
And then there's this song.
And Toy Tune, Indian.
There's Indian. It's an Indian song.
Indian song, yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck was this guy doing?
It's incredible, yeah.
It's an incredible album. Since then, for up to 7 months, I was just listening to that album. over and
Yeah.
over and over and over and over again. I'm actually gonna listen to it today. So I kind of see what you're saying. So that was where when you said that, I'm like, okay, I know a lot of people talk about listening, but I've never had the opportunity to kind of actually discuss it with somebody,
Yeah.
in this way. So yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's a habit I'm gonna keep cultivating. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne's music. It's funny how like you didn't get it at first.
I
Like
didn't get it.
there's a lot of music that I didn't get at first too. But then like you got into it, there was like a gateway
Yeah.
something.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you know this world that Wayne is,
Yeah.
musically,
Mm-hmm.
now you can appreciate the other stuff and be like, oh well, that's actually
Yeah.
great, It's
Yeah.
great stuff.
Yeah. They said the first person that did that to me was Fela Kuti. When I was in
Yeah.
Nigeria and I was
Yeah.
listening to his music, I wasn't a musician, so I would just listen to the things he said, and in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm going, okay, this guy is just crazy, and he has a bunch of musicians playing behind. I didn't even understand him. I was
Yeah.
a kid. I was
Yeah.
7 years old,
Yeah.
and then I became a teenager and listened to his music again, and I
Yeah.
was shocked. I said, how did he come up with this? How did he do all these things, So yeah. All right. We're going to end with a game I called Turn Up, Turn Down. Sometimes I call it Turn Up or Mute. Sometimes I just call it Turn Up. So I'm going to give you two options,
Okay.
right? You're going to say turn one up and then we mute the other.
Okay.
But the caveat is this. I don't want to get you in trouble. The caveat is that the one that you turn up is just the one you're feeling at the moment.
Okay.
You could leave my apartment and then get in your car and you feel the other one. So it's
Exactly,
just
yeah.
for now. It's just for
Okay.
this particular moment. Okay. Bulgarian music, Brazilian music.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know.
I told you it's tough. It's a tough game.
Oh.
You have to choose one. Sorry.
Well, I mean, okay, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
This time I'll choose Bulgarian music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I told you about Tamburitsan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school in Pennsylvania, Duquesne
Yeah.
University, Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
and there's this group, this folk music group, but they only play European music, mostly Eastern European music. And from what I'm reading, it's like the I think they say it's the oldest folk music touring group in the US. I have to double check that because I kind of don't believe it. But I know that the group is very, very well known, very famous, and they give scholarship to Eastern European students to come to
that's nice.
to Pittsburgh, to Duquesne, to join the group. And most of the people that they give scholarship to are some of the most talented musicians and dancers I've seen. So Tamburitsans, look, check them out.
I will.
check them out
Yeah.
on YouTube. All right. So the next one, be careful. Ray Brown, Charles Mingus.
Charles Mingus.
Charles Mingus. Okay,
Yes,
that was
yeah.
easy. All right,
Yeah.
good. Why? Why Charles Mingus?
Well, Charles Mingus was the first. I when I started listening to jazz, I didn't like the bass players. It's like I didn't like the bass players, but I didn't pay attention to the bass. I like the horn players,
Mhm.
Like the first people I really like were Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker
Mm-hmm.
and Miles, and I would just listen to the horn players. And then the first bass player who really caught my attention was Mingus, and then he was such an interesting figure because he was the first real bass player band leader and the first bass player who's such a prominent composer.
Yeah.
And he was like a civil rights voice, and he was he had all these he included theater in his music. He was a really a Renaissance man in a sense. Also I was fascinated by the fact that he's being ignored as a bass player because he's such a great composer, but actually he's one of the most accomplished bass player. He was an incredible bass player. And I mean, nothing to take away from Ray Brown,
Yeah.
but Ray Brown is in some ways the opposite of Mingus, in that Ray Brown was so slick and so like cool, and like, whereas Mingus, I had this like other like energy about him, and like something like unpredictable.
Yeah. And I think he kind of started reaching out to other genres. Like I think he worked with Johnny Mitchell, right?
Yeah, well, that was more of a Johnny Mitchell idea, but Mingus was one of the first guys that he was very versed in European classical music, and he combined it very well with like African American music, which up to this point was not a very common thing to do. And he just did it very effortlessly, where like he would like have elements of the most basic blues, and then like some Debussy influences, and make like just incredible music out of those like seemingly disparate influences. Yeah, he was very, I mean, I hear that as a person he was not that pleasant, but I'm an advocate for that, to separate the person from the artist. I don't care what person they were, if they were a good artist, maybe, and a bad person, they affected badly a few people, but helped humanity with their art. So
and sometimes the people that you hear about them, they're not pleasant, they're this and that. It turns out that they focus their energy on a few people. Maybe they've mentored a few really good upcoming bassists, and they focus their energy. They are not worried about the rest of the world,
Exactly.
All right, lastly, 2 babies of yours, Glide, Gone.
Ooh, that's a tough one. If I had to choose one for this particular moment, I'd rather choose Glide, because it's more uplifting.
All right.
And Gone is maybe like a little darker and sadder. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. All right, Peter Slavov, this was very, very good to do. This feels really good. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we can do it again. I'm gonna keep listening to your music now that you've encouraged me to listen more. And I'll check you out whenever you play. I'll try to stop by.
Sure. By the way, the album release party is gonna be at Smalls.
All right.
On May 13th.
May 13th. Yes. Okay. Very good. Okay. I do a little intro, so I'm gonna mention it at the intro also. All right. Very good. All right. Cool. Later.
Thank you.